Sorry, Gary, would you like to ask yours? And then we'll ask one on housing from Eric.
Yeah, I've got a question to ask. But firstly, can I just say how bloody angry I am that my life has been taken over by planning issues? Because out of the whole of this room, there's only 2 people being paid to be here. The rest of us are all volunteers who are fighting for our lives. And that sounds quite dramatic. I live directly opposite the proposed site on for Sainsbury's. And it is Sainsbury's because there's a big 2-page advert, so how he can say you don't know who the operator is beyond me. 2 years ago, a letter arrived on my doorstep, had my wife in tears. It said, we wanted to speak to you about some development in the area. I had a man from Mather Jamie. I've got emails on me if people want to read them. And Mather Jamie represent Henry Davidson, the housing developers, and also St Modwin. And he said, we want to buy part of your land to build at the side of you. Luckily, the man at the side of me won't sell, so that stopped that. But that man said one very important thing, which is what I got involved in this in the first place. He said, I can't tell you what it's going to be. Don't talk to your neighbours. But what I can tell you is there's a council will for this to happen. I found out what that will was. It's £21 million. Pure and simple. Now the question. What do Telford and Wrekin intend to do if Eric Pickles turns down the planning application for Station Road?
Who'd like that one, please?
If Eric Pickles turns it down, we review the case and take it from there. It's no good saying what we're going to do if he turns it down now. We need to know why he would turn it down and on what grounds he's turned it down. And then we'll take it from there and review the situation we find ourselves in.
Thank you. Right, we'll have a question on housing now.
Yeah, I think the problem is when you come on an hour after we've started, a lot of the things I was intending to ask have already been covered. And one thing I don't want to do is duplicate what a lot of other people have said and said very well, particularly my friends here from Maynard's Croft. But it appears to me, and I've served on Wrekin Council since 1991, so I think I know what I'm talking about. What we have got a case here now is that whenever an application comes before Plans Board, there seems to be 2 words which seem to focus more than anything. They are sustainable development. And that keeps being thrown back at every application, whether it's Newport or not, but particularly Newport's case, to decide that if anything comes forward, yes, it should be accepted by Plans Board because it's sustainable development. Now, sustainable development can mean lots of things to lots of different people. I would suggest that Maynard's Croft, and I do declare an interest, it's in my ward, and I don't apologise for that. But to me, I proved on that night at Plans Board that the national policy framework was in fact cherry-picked against anything that was against that development. What was said at the Plans Board were completely false statements in my opinion, in that they tried to prove that a piece of land, which has been pointed out earlier, is... You could not find a piece of land which was less suitable to build on, let's be honest. It's next to an SSSI, the canal. It's peat everywhere. We're going to have hundreds and hundreds of piles dug. It's in the MPPF document, it clearly states if a piece of land has a particular, if you like, need for the local community to maintain it and to have some cherished value, it specifically points this out. And yet when I pointed this out on that Plans Board meeting, that was ignored. I made several points which are all in that document, all of which were overruled in favour of sustainable development. So it appears to me that whatever comes forward, in Newport particularly, on greenfield sites, will be authorised because apparently we have this need for all these houses, which I do not believe has been proved. We did have the figures earlier from 2007 and the core strategy of 600 houses, 60 a year for 10 years. That's been trebled now. Don't know where those trebled numbers have come from. But what we have got is housing being built, and I've asked the questions without any proper answers coming back. Where are the school places going to come from? Because we've already got the schools in Newport, as everybody knows, are already oversubscribed. So where are the places going to come from? There are already people coming from outside Newport to come to these schools. And if we're going to build 800, 900, 1,000 houses, you don't need me to do the maths. There's an awful lot of children going to have to go outside of Newport to go to school with the necessary car journeys, busing around and everything else. Plus, the infrastructure that's going to be required. The problems that we've seen what's happened in the last few weeks with floods. What's going to happen with tarmac going on green fields? We all know the water runs off and runs down the road. All of these things don't seem to have been considered. One final point, when we're talking about the Sainsbury's application, which I did make when I was at the original hearing. Sainsbury's, for those who don't know, made an application in the Telford retail park where they currently are to extend their supermarket. And that was turned down on the grounds that it wasn't suitable there because it would affect the town centre's profitability. And yet we want to build one, or the council do, on their land, on the edge of a market town, which would be larger than the store that's already in Telford. So how do those things come together? Sorry? Excuse me, Phil. If I want to ask you a question, I'll ask you. Until then, please be quiet. You haven't had...
1 second, please. A lot of people have heard some of these arguments. I think the message is very clear about the issues. What is the solid question you want to ask that we can get while we have some of the officials, please?
Well, I've made several requests, if you like. I'll ask one final question then. Is it the case, Michael, that in every time an application comes forward for Newport, whether it be on brownfield or greenfield sites, it's going to be approved irrespective of whether it's right or wrong? Thank you.
Before I hand the mic over, 1 second, please, to let Mark add something to that.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, and thank you, Eric, for that overview. And I think it's worth actually repeating, forgive me, Councillor Norton, some of these really, really important points. And I don't think anybody should have the debate shut down. The problem with all of these issues, we haven't actually had enough debate. And people have been told about certain hearings and certain applications at the very last minute, and in some subterfuge way often. So I think more debate the merrier, actually, Councillor Norton, if you'll forgive me. And I'd like to congratulate also Mr. Wade. Gary, I think you have every right to be angry, but you are dignified in your anger. And I think I say that really to the whole of Newport. You've got every right to be angry, but your dignity in your anger, I think, shows a real strength as a community. But I wanted to just come back to what Charles said earlier about brownfield sites. And he said there weren't enough brownfield sites in Newport. There are plenty of brownfield sites in Newport. But to be fair, there are not plenty or enough brownfield sites in Newport if you want to build so many houses so soon over a short period of time. And the fact is, there are plenty of brownfield sites available now and for the numbers to meet the core strategy, but they're not in Newport. They're actually in other parts of the borough, in South Telford. So if the core strategy is so important, if the